My name's Jen Bruce, and I live in Arcata, California. For the last 7 years, I've been a preparation and integration specialist for people that are utilizing psychedelic medicines for healing from a myriad of different conditions, but generally trauma, addiction, and mental health are my three main ones that I work with. I'm in recovery myself. I was in addiction to primarily alcohol for 17 years. I had been sober for almost 12 years now. January 2nd, 2023. I was born into a family that carried a tremendous amount of generational trauma. My grandfather, my father, my great-grandfather all served in the armed forces. And, I'm half Irish and half Scandinavian, and drinking was a way of life. And so at a really young age, I actually ended up leaving home and going on Grateful Dead tour. So at my relatively young age for that era, I was able to experience the psychedelic era that was kind of trailing out from the 60s. And I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. So I had my first psychedelic experiences were within the Grateful Dead community, and also, with like Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters. I think I was working at their parties by the time I was 18 years old. And so, in that there was a lot of beauty, but there was not a therapeutic container, and there's a lot of other drugs and a lot of other things. And due to my family's background and my wiring and my genes and my entire constellation, I fell into addiction in that scene. And so fast forward many years later, I chose sobriety, and I really applied myself to the traditional program of 12-step, and it saved my life. And I learned how to not drink and to have my life be manageable, and a lot of really great things started to happen. I got into yoga. That helped me. I've been to India many times. I got into nutrition. That helped me. When I started out my journey to sobriety, I was also, like all of us with addiction stories, was diagnosed with depression and anxiety disorder and PTSD. And so you can imagine when you put down your medicine, in my case it was alcohol, those things, although they improved, they still remained. And like most people with addiction issues, the addictive tendency was still there. And so what brought me to my knees in recovery was my work addiction. I was feeling so bad in recovery, fully applying myself to all the things I mentioned, that I felt, as a mother of a young daughter, 2 years old at this time, that was maybe my only hope to function. I was exhausted. I had fibromyalgia, they called it, chronic pain. I had fatigue. It was just exhausting. And so although I'd gotten my life back from alcohol, it wasn't much of a life to be living. And so as a last-ditch effort, I went down to Mexico, because I'd seen a few people I knew go down for addiction purposes to get treated by this medicine called Ibogaine, which comes from the country of Gabon in Africa, and the Bwiti, the Pygmy people. And so I went down, I took the last money I had. I was scared to death. I left my 2-year-old little girl at home. I got ostracized from the 12-step community for choosing to do this because it was a mind-altering substance, but I was in a position where if I didn't alter my mind, I wasn't going to make it. And what happened down there was absolutely magical. I think the first thing that I said after I came out of my experience was that this is the medicine they tell us as people in recovery doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, but it did. And the outcome of that experience was it was the very first time in my life that I'd actually felt good in my own body. I had no pain, I had no anxiety, I had no fatigue, I had no sadness, I had no depression. One of the first things that happened after my Ibogaine experience was that I could do a slideshow of all the faces and all the people, because I'd been through a tremendously long period of painful events for decades and decades of my life. And it's not to be a victim. Everything's happening for us, and I've gotten to learn and grow, so it's not like a pity story here, it's just simply what happened. But I was able for the first time in my life to have a slideshow and have no emotional charge behind it. It was absolutely 100% at peace and ease. And, so at that point, I realized that I had been striving towards something that I didn't even know what it was, because I'd been comparing how I felt now in recovery at 5 years back then to my very worst feeling was when I was in my addiction, and that went on for a long time. So I realized I didn't even have anything to gauge my wellness by. And I also realized that I was born in fight or flight response because I was born to a mother who was under a tremendous amount of stress herself while in the womb. And we now know this is true through epigenetics. So it gave me the freedom to experience wellness in my own body. And ever since then, that's been my North Star in my life of what I need to do more of to maintain that feeling of wellness, and that ability to viscerally experience feeling good in your own skin is so motivating. I mean, it's the greatest relapse prevention tool that I have, is because I know how I can feel, most of the time, and it's because of that Ibogaine. So I came home, dropped everything I was doing, and I've been working in this field ever since.